Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're really diving into something extraordinary. It's a pivotal moment in, well, both intellectual and spiritual history, but also a really powerful story of personal change.
That's right. We're going to meet Al-Ghazali.
Exactly. Al-Ghazali, a name that echoes through Islamic civilization. He's often called one of its most influential thinkers, period.
Absolutely. And what makes his story just so compelling, so fascinating, is this radical choice he made.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable. He famously abandoned this glittering, really prestigious academic career. I mean, he was at the absolute top, the pinnacle of scholarly fame.
And he gave it all up. He chose instead to pursue the direct, the experiential path of a Sufi mystic.
It just forces you to ask questions, doesn't it? About truth, about knowledge, what it even means to live, a meaningful life.
And our mission really in this deep dive is to explore that profound shift. It was almost seismic, this change in Al-Ghazali's life. We want to understand why he made such a dramatic turn.
And dig into his masterwork, too, right?
Definitely. The Revival of the Religious Sciences. It's this monumental text where he brilliantly managed this grand synthesis. He wove together Islamic law, theology, and mysticism.
So it's like a complete package.
Pretty much. Offering what's essentially a holistic guide for a life defined by inner purity and devotion. It's really so much more than just a historical document. Think of it like a blueprint for spiritual architecture, designed to transform the individual from the inside out.
That's a great way to put it. And for you, listening right now, navigating this world just overflowing with information, constant pressures, this deep dive really raises a critical question, maybe even an urgent one. What does it truly mean to be well-informed in our own lives today? What can Al-Ghazali's journey, his quest for these deeper truths beyond just the surface stuff, what can it teach you about connecting with a different kind of knowledge, maybe a more profound kind?
It's a challenge, isn't it, to sort of reevaluate what we think we know and maybe even how we know it.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit more for Al-Ghazali. This wasn't just some average scholar.
Not at all. Far from it.
At the height of his career, he held this incredibly esteemed position, professor at the Nizamiyya Madrasa in Baghdad, which was, basically the Harvard or Oxford of the Islamic world at that time.
Absolute center of learning.
And he'd mastered everything: logic, philosophy, all the intricate theological debates of the Ash'ari school. He was celebrated, revered. Outwardly, he had everything an academic could possibly want. But like you said, it wasn't enough for him somehow. What was missing, what was lacking in this brilliant, successful life?
What's really fascinating, and honestly it's something you see across different times and cultures, is that Al-Ghazali, despite this unparalleled intellect, this huge public acclaim, he reached a point where he just found intellectual mastery alone felt, insufficient.
Insufficient for what, though? For his soul.
Exactly. For the deepest yearnings of his soul. He'd spent years, maybe decades, on rigorous study, mastering dialectic, the art of argument, understanding every nuance of theological doctrine.
He could win any debate, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. He could dissect any philosophical argument, rebut any opponent. But this profound sense of dissatisfaction just started to gnaw at him. He began questioning if all this knowledge, this ability to articulate it perfectly, truly led to ultimate truth, or even just inner peace.
Right.
And you see these really striking parallels elsewhere. Take Augustine of Hippo, for example. In his Confessions, he reflects on this very thing.
What did he say?
He basically said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, I could rattle everything off like I knew my lessons, but if I hadn't sought your path in Christ, our Savior, I wouldn't have been done. I would have been done for.
Wow. So knowing about it wasn't the same as knowing it.
Precisely. Augustine, like Al-Ghazali, was a master of rhetoric, of philosophy. But he realized that those philosophical books, with all their intellectual weight, they just couldn't teach the kind of selfless, transformative love that's built on humility, on direct experience.
So for Al-Ghazali, the external stuff, the legal rulings, the theological arguments, they started feeling empty.
Hollow, increasingly hollow, yeah. Without that inner living connection to the divine, it was like having the map, but not actually experiencing the territory.
So this points to a really deep internal hunger inside him, a craving for something more than just collecting facts or being good at arguing.
Absolutely. It sounds like he wanted a different quality of understanding, something that actually touched his core, his very being.
Yeah,
it really speaks to this yearning for a deeper, more personal, more experiential engagement with truth. You see this echoed in other traditions too. Paramahansa Yogananda, in Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks about Lahiri Mahasaya, teaching that words are only shells, just empty shells. He urged his disciples to win by intensity of interest, and he specifically warned against what he called the false satisfaction of an undigested knowledge.
Undigested knowledge. I like that. So it's not about just swallowing information whole.
Exactly. It's about truly internalizing it, letting it transform you. It has to become a lived understanding. Al-Ghazali found himself surrounded by these shells, arguments, definitions, legal points, but felt increasingly cut off from the pearl of divine reality they were supposed to hold.
And this ties into mysticism more broadly.
Definitely. I mean, even a profound mystic like Meister Eckhart, famously declared, "Whatever thou sayest of him is untrue."
Which sounds quite radical.
It does, but it's not saying theology is worthless. It's emphasizing that words about God, even the most beautiful, eloquent words, they aren't the direct experience of
Yeah,
man.
just pointers, signposts.
Exactly. Just signposts, concepts, not the unmediated reality itself. For Al-Ghazali, who had scaled the highest peaks of intellectual achievement, this realization must have been, well, both devastating and maybe liberating.
Oh, so liberating.
Because it meant true knowledge wasn't confined to libraries or lecture halls. It had to be sought within the heart.
Okay, so if external knowledge, even the most sophisticated kind, isn't enough, what does that internal landscape look like for someone like Al-Ghazali, someone grappling with these huge, unsettling questions? It must have been pretty turbulent inside.
That's a really key question.
Yeah.
And thankfully, Al-Ghazali's own writings, especially his spiritual autobiography, give us a glimpse. Many spiritual texts describe this intense internal struggle that happens when our mind's own book of law.
What do you mean by book of law?
Our ingrained beliefs, societal conditioning, the ego's rules for how we think we should be. When that dictates our perceptions, it often leads us away from our true selves.
Right, like the inner critic.
Exactly. The Four Agreements talks about this internal judge that's constantly evaluating everything we do, think, feel. For Al-Ghazali, this judge might have sounded like relentless self-critique about his own spiritual dryness, despite all his academic success, or feeling like he wasn't living up to the ideal of a truly devout scholar.
That must have been a heavy burden, especially with a title like Proof of Islam.
Immense pressure. And this internal judge, with its strict rules, it can lead to deep self-rejection, a constant feeling of needing to pretend to be what we are not, wearing these social masks.
Which sounds exhausting.
Utterly. And it creates what Course in Miracles calls a split mind. The ego, in its cleverness to preserve itself, actually attacks the very power that preserves it.
How does that work?
Well, this internal contradiction creates extreme anxiety. The ego tries to survive by projecting threats onto others, denying its own actions, which basically guarantees you never feel truly safe.
And for Al-Ghazali, this showed up how? Physically.
Right. Yes, profoundly. It manifested as a deep crisis of faith, an inability to even perform his duties. He describes losing his voice, his will to teach, even his appetite. He was convinced he was on the brink of spiritual ruin, a real paralysis.
So this wasn't just some intellectual disagreement about philosophy or a polite debate. It was a deep inner malaise, a kind of sickness of the soul that affected his body too.
Precisely. It was a recognition of this deep internal fragmentation that was generating significant unhappiness, despite all the outward signs of success. The book Waking Up highlights this. It points out that our sense of being a unified self is often a kind of fiction, really. It's produced by lots of separate mental processes we're not even aware of, and it notes that a human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind.
That rings true.
Doesn't it? So Al-Ghazali's crisis likely involved recognizing this internal fragmentation, this unhappiness caused by a mind always wandering, always judging itself by some external rule book, religious expectations, personal ego, all of it.
And that pushed him.
It spurred this urgent search for genuine integration, for inner peace, for a more authentic, unified sense of self. It was about moving past the appearance of unity to confront the underlying chaos and find real spiritual wholeness.
Okay, so Al-Ghazali didn't just have this internal shift in thinking. He made this incredibly dramatic, almost unthinkable outward change. He actually left his prestigious job in Baghdad, left his wealth, his academic life, even his family for a time, and journeyed off. What does it really mean to abandon in this context? It sounds like way more than just quitting a job.
It really is. What's so striking is that his act wasn't just a resignation letter. It was a complete reorientation of his priorities, a fundamental shift in his internal values that then manifested in the most, dramatic outward way possible.
So letting go of everything.
Everything external, yeah. Not just possessions, but his identity, his status, the validation that came with it. It reminds me a bit of Siddhartha's journey in Hesse's novel.
Right, Siddhartha.
Yeah. He consciously leaves the established paths, even the revered ones, included the Buddha himself, choosing to go to the uncertain. He talks about feeling this deep sadness, finding his life worthless and pointless, wanting to shake off this whole desolate dream.
That sounds very much like the crisis Al-Ghazali described.
It really resonates with Al-Ghazali's own documented spiritual paralysis, that intense sadness before he left. He basically chose the unknown, giving up everything for a pursuit he couldn't maybe fully articulate yet, but knew deep down was absolutely essential.
And this connects to Sufi ideas too, this detachment.
Profoundly. Rumi in the Masnavi talks about detachment from creation. He says imagination gets blurred too much by mixing with creation. For Al-Ghazali, creation would have been that whole world of academic debates, social pressures, the chase for worldly influence, all the distractions.
So the detachment is internal first.
Exactly. Rumi even suggests God seeks this kind of heart, one that can live apart from those worldly attachments. The true separation is internal, a spiritual liberation from the grip of anything that hides the divine. Al-Ghazali's physical departure was just the outward sign of this inner letting go. It was a necessary step to clear his vision, to align his heart purely with God.
So it wasn't just about giving up stuff like material things. It was a fundamental shift in values, in how he defined success or fulfillment, like re-engineering his whole inner world.
Indeed, it's about consciously, deliberately turning inward, valuing the spiritual, the inner experience over the material and the external badges of status. You see echoes of this, maybe less overtly spiritual, in someone like Thoreau.
In Weldon.
Right, that radical simplification. He advises, cultivate poverty like a garden herb, sell your clothes and keep your thoughts. And crucially, he says, money is not required to buy one necessary of the soul.
So for Al-Ghazali, it wasn't about being poor for its own sake.
No, not at all. It was a deliberate choice to simplify the external, remove the noise, clear away the clutter that was blocking genuine self-discovery and that direct connection to spiritual truth. Abandoning the outer world became this act of intense cultivation for the inner world, preparing the ground, so to speak.
So this act of abandonment, it isn't really a loss or making yourself smaller. It's actually gaining something more essential, more true. What kind of power, what kind of maybe authentic strength comes out of that kind of radical renunciation?
Well, if you look at the broader picture of spiritual growth, it's this massive shift, moving away from seeking external validation or control and instead cultivating what Gary Zukav calls authentic power.
Authentic power, how's that different?
It comes from within. Zukav contrasts the quest for external power, which he says now leads nowhere, with the decision to build within yourself authentic power, aligning yourself with a deeper purpose, an evolutionary path.
So Al-Ghazali let go of the power of his intellect to win debates, the power of his position.
Exactly. He let go of that external power and embraced the power of inner truth, the transformative power you find in a purified heart. It completely reframes your whole purpose. You stop trying to get things from the world's status, recognition, wealth, and focus on becoming something from within, becoming a vessel for divine knowledge, for love. And then you let that inner reality shape the outer.
This sounds less like striving for achievements and more like embracing a different way of being in the world, tuning into an inner compass instead of chasing external proof.
Precisely. The Conversations with God books talk about this idea of divine dichotomy, where you can realize there's nothing I have, there's nothing I have to do, and there's nothing I have to be except exactly what I'm being right now. That realization, it frees you from that relentless cycle of doingness, always driven by external demands or what the ego wants.
So you act from a place of being.
Yes, instead of constantly trying to become somebody through what you do. For Al-Ghazali, this shift let him detach from the pressure of performing as the great scholar. He could just be a seeker, a devoted servant of God. Simple as that, in a way.
Simple but profound.
Very profound. And this inner shift, this radical letting go of the ego's striving, it's similar to what the Four Agreements calls the initiation of death.
That sounds intense. The death of what?
The death of the old dream in your mind. The parasite, as it calls it, the judge, the victim, all those ingrained beliefs and limitations, they die forever. For Al-Ghazali, this was the death of his old academic identity, his attachment to intellectual pride, to worldly status.
So it's a transformation, shedding the old self.
Exactly. To reveal a more authentic, unburdened self. And yeah, it's scary. There's a natural fear that comes with such a fundamental change. But it's the death of what's false to reveal what's true. You have to tear down the old to build a new, spiritually integrated self.
Okay, so Al-Ghazali embraces this new inner path, the Sufi path, but his writings make it clear this wasn't a walk in the
Not at
park.
all. Far from it.
He faced intense struggles inside, periods of really deep doubt, spiritual dryness. What are some of those harsh realities, those challenges that come with this kind of spiritual purification? This journey into the soul's depths that mystics often call a dark night.
You're right. It's universally described as incredibly challenging. Al-Ghazali's own accounts in his deliverance from error really paint a vivid picture of his struggles. And this period of inner cleansing, it's often called the dark night, maybe most famously described by St. John of the Cross.
Right, dark night of the soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He talks about it as a purgation of sense and spirit. Now, to understand what's being purged, you kind of have to understand what the beginner's spiritual enthusiasm often looks like.
Okay.
St. John notes that beginners, in what he calls their spiritual gluttony, which is a great phrase,
Yeah.
they often seek sensible pleasure and devotion in prayer and other practices. They're drawn to the emotional comfort, the warm, fuzzy feelings, the intellectual satisfaction that early spiritual experiences can sometimes bring.
The spiritual high?
Kinda, yeah. But then God, in this purification process, very justly, wisely, and lovingly denies this comfort to them.
Denies it. Why? That sounds harsh.
Well, it's not meant to be punitive. It's precisely to purge them of that attachment to superficial spiritual comforts, those initial, maybe less pure motivations. This denial leads to intense aridities and temptations.
Like what?
Dryness in prayer, feeling like God is absent, losing enthusiasm, losing all taste for anything that isn't directly perceived as God. For Al-Ghazali, imagine how unsettling that would be. He'd lost his intellectual certainty, and now the spiritual consolation he was seeking wasn't there either. His heart, which had been attached to various forms of satisfaction, was being stripped bare, prepared for something deeper.
Wow. That sounds like a complete spiritual dismantling, tearing down your whole inner structure, leaving you feeling totally exposed, maybe lost.
It really is a dismantling and a profound humbling. It empties the soul of everything that isn't essential. St. John describes the soul in this state feeling like it's perishing and melting away, in a cruel spiritual death, even as if it had been swallowed by a beast, experiencing an anguish like Jonah in the whale.
Goodness.
It involves being stripped of all the habitual affections, the attachments of the old man, the ego self, the identity built on success, pride, even spiritual highs. It leaves the understanding dark, the will dry, the memory empty, and the affections in the deepest affliction. Imagine Al-Ghazali, the master logician, finding his understanding dark, the great writer, his memory empty, the revered teacher, his will totally dry.
It's hard to even picture.
And during this time, you might feel completely unable to even pray or focus. Because, as St. John says, God is passively working here in the soul. It's not something you do so much as something you undergo. You have to surrender control, which is hard.
Incredibly hard.
But paradoxically, St. John emphasizes, the greater is the darkness wherein the soul journeys, the greater is its security.
How can darkness mean security?
Because the soul is being purified, like gold in fire. It's losing its grip on false comforts, false knowledge, ego desires. It's becoming open to a deeper, more secure, more authentic union with God. It's a profound, humbly, but it's preparing the heart for true spiritual perception, turning it into that alchemist.
So in this incredibly difficult space, this arid, seemingly empty place, what keeps the seeker going? What allowed someone like Al-Ghazali to continue? How do you even begin to cultivate inner purity and devotion when everything feels so dark and prayer feels useless?
Perseverance. And specific intentional disciplines, they become absolutely key, turning those trials into catalysts. The Philokalia, that collection of Eastern Orthodox spiritual texts, it emphasizes that while practicing virtues, good behavior frees the intellect from distraction and hatred, which is good. It's spiritual contemplation that releases it also from forgetfulness and ignorance. And that enables undistracted prayer.
So it's a deeper level of practice.
Right. For Al-Ghazali, it meant moving beyond just following the law or debating theology. It meant sustained, focused attention on God, really internalizing his faith.
And this connects to other traditions, too.
Oh, absolutely. The Bhagavad Gita instructs seekers to regulate senses, to curb sin, and it lists qualities needed for true knowledge. Humility, nonviolence, tolerance, self-control, unalloyed devotional service.
These aren't just passive things you hope for, then.
Not at all. They're active engagements, things you cultivate through discipline. Al-Ghazali, in his new life, committed himself to intense self-discipline, meditation, rigorous spiritual exercises. These were the practical steps to actually embody those virtues.
So it sounds like continuous active internal work, constant vigilance over your inner state, like tending a very delicate garden in really harsh weather.
Precisely. And you see this in The Way of a Pilgrim, that Russian classic. It describes the effect of constant prayer, like the Jesus prayer. It notes its power to constantly distract the soul from sinful acts and draw it towards the most essential thing of all, union with God.
Even if it feels dry or impure.
Yes, even then. The instruction is, patiently await the fruits. Persist without needing immediate results. The combination of sobriety with humility and refuting thoughts with prayer acts like a lantern to guide our way through that inner darkness.
Interesting.
And Eckhart Tolle, in The Power of Now, suggests a similar active self-observation, constantly monitoring your mental emotional state, asking, am I at ease right now? Bringing unconscious stuff into consciousness.
Facing the pain body, as he calls it.
Exactly. Feeling the emotions fully instead of creating mental stories around them. This active moment-to-moment awareness, this intentional redirection of attention, it's fundamental to navigating purification and fostering real inner purity. It turns every struggle into a chance for growth.
Okay, so after enduring all those trials, navigating that dark night, what's the ultimate fruit? What comes out of this intense inner journey for Al-Ghazali, or for anyone who takes that path? How does the heart, through all this rigorous processing, truly become an alchemist? Transforming the suffering, the discipline, the yearning into something transcendent, something lasting.
Well, the ultimate goal, and really the profound fruit of this whole demanding alchemical journey of the heart, is a state of deep, deep connection and an all-consuming transformative love. St. Teresa of Avila, in her interior castle.
Yes.
She talks about the soul's insatiable desire to enjoy God, where the more she learns about the greatness of her God, the more her love for him grows. And this isn't just some gentle affection, it's an unbearably strong longing, feeling wounded by love, as the Philokalia vividly puts it.
Wounded by love.
Yeah, it signifies an intensity, a piercing quality. Al-Ghazali's own mystical writings speak of a similar burning love on this direct knowledge, and that just went way beyond intellectual understanding.
So it's a different kind of knowing.
Completely. And this intense, pure devotion, it culminates in what Theologia Germanica calls an inward sight, which hath power to perceive the one true good, a state where all knowledge of the parts is swallowed up when the whole is known.
So you move from fragmented understanding to seeing the whole picture.
Exactly. From conceptual, fragmented knowing to a unified, holistic awareness. The heart perceives truth directly, no intermediaries.
That sounds like a complete dissolution of the separate self, merging into something much greater, maybe the divine.
It is precisely that. The Upanishads, those ancient Indian texts, they describe this ultimate state of oneness. Whoever worships him as such, what is like him comes to him, not what is unlike. And this state is described as peaceful, soundless, fearless, sorrowless bliss.
Bliss.
A profound inner contentment that goes beyond all the dualities, all the suffering, all the anxieties of that split mind we talked about earlier. And Plotinus, the great Neoplatonist philosopher, in the Enneads, he suggests something similar, this radical unity. He posits that my soul and your soul should be one, and indeed all souls should be one. He even asserts that intellect must be identical with the intelligible.
Meaning the knower and the known become one.
Exactly. The lover and the beloved merge. The heart, through its purification, through that alchemical transformation, it processes all those individual experiences, the good, the bad, the difficult, and transmutes them into this direct, unmediated awareness of the all-encompassing unified reality. It becomes a channel for divine presence.
So how does this profound inner change, this alchemical shift in the heart, how does it actually show up in someone's daily life, in their interactions? Do they just retreat from the world, or does it change how they engage with it?
This is where it gets really practical and impactful. A pure heart naturally radiates virtue. It fundamentally transforms how you engage with the world. Al-Ghazali, remember, after his time of solitude and purification, he did return to teach.
Right, he didn't stay a hermit forever.
No. But his message was profoundly different. He came back not as some detached academic, but as a guide filled with this experiential knowledge. The Tao Te Ching says, the Tao of heaven has no favorites, it always sides with one who has a pure heart. And one with true virtue always seeks a way to give.
Giving, not just materially.
No, it's an overflowing, an inevitable outward expression of that inner state of purity and connection. It naturally leads to embodying deep compassion, selfless service. like Ram Dass talks about in Be Here Now.
What does he say?
He suggests the method to end suffering is to keep converting every relationship into one of compassion, making the profane sacred, transmuting energy from lower, ego-driven states to higher, more inclusive, altruistic ones.
So for Al-Ghazali, the outer acts, the religious laws, they became infused with inner meaning, guided by love.
Exactly, aimed at the well-being of everyone, not just checking boxes on a legal code.
So it's not just about feeling good inside or reaching some personal state of bliss. It's about a fundamentally different way of relating to everything and everyone around you, actually impacting the world.
Precisely. It really aligns with what C.S. Lewis describes through Screwtape, ironically, as God's real aim for us.
Preach here.
To rejoice in our own talents, as frankly and gratefully as in his neighbor's talents or in a sunrise, an elephant, or a waterfall, fostering this charity and gratitude for all selves, including your own, but free from ego, envy, or pride.
That's a beautiful image.
Isn't it? This state reflects this deep inner peace, this unshakable wisdom that just radiates outward. You see it embodied in figures like Siddhartha again, sitting quietly by the river with Vasudeva, where silent love and cheerfulness, understanding and knowledge shine at him. His very presence becomes a mirror of his inner purity. The alchemical heart doesn't just experience oneness, it lives it, it radiates it, transforming every interaction into a chance for love, wisdom, and virtue.
Okay, so Al-Ghazali's genius wasn't just his personal transformation, amazing as that was. His brilliance was also in his ability to articulate this journey for others, to map it out, make it accessible in that huge work, The Revival of the Religious Sciences, the Ihya Ulum al-Din.
A monumental achievement.
He took these different parts of Islamic thought, the strictness of law, faith, the reason of theology, kalam, and the deep spirituality of mysticism, tasawwuf or Sufism, and he wove them together, integrated them into this cohesive, holistic whole. How on earth did he manage to bring together these threads that often seem separate, even conflicting, and why did it have such a massive impact?
Well, what was truly revolutionary about it was that Al-Ghazali provided this comprehensive path for the ordinary believer. He bridged these intellectual and spiritual divides that had actually grown quite wide by his time.
There was tension between these groups.
Oh, definitely. Before Al-Ghazali, you often had jurists and theologians looking at Sufis with suspicion. They saw the ecstatic practices, the focus on inner experience, as maybe undisciplined, potentially even heretical.
And the Sufis.
Conversely, Sufis sometimes saw the jurists as just being overly legalistic, kind of missing the spirit of the law. And they saw theologians as being trapped in dry, intellectual arguments, totally disconnected from the living heart of faith.
So Al-Ghazali, having mastered all three and gone through his own crisis, he was uniquely placed.
Uniquely positioned to reconcile them. His work was this grand synthesis. It reminds me of how the perennial philosophy notes the later Mahayana Buddhists developed this splendid and imposing system to reconcile spiritual experience with philosophy, going beyond earlier limitations.
So he was clarifying the connections.
Exactly. He sought to clarify the truth, you might say, showing how these different streams of knowledge, often seen as separate or even opposed, ultimately flow from the same divine source. He essentially argued that outer religious practices, the law, are like the body, theology is the mind, and mysticism is the spirit.
And you need all three.
You need all three for a complete, healthy faith. He saw the danger in fragmenting religious understanding. He recognized that separating these elements was like trying to sever what God commanded to be joined, a concept you even find in the Quran itself, warning against dividing God's revelations.
So it sounds like a complete reevaluation, bringing the whole person, body, mind, and spirit into alignment within one unified spiritual framework, almost like an ancient form of holistic wellness for the soul.
It absolutely speaks to recognizing us as a triune being made up of body, mind, and spirit, where harmony between these levels leads to astonishing things, as Conversations with God puts it. Al-Ghazali understood that focusing only on external law, just observing rules or getting lost in dry theological debates, it missed the essential inner dimension, the heart, the spirit.
So what's the purpose of law and theology then, in his view?
He argued the purpose of law is crucial to create a just society, yes, but also to discipline the outer self, preparing it for the inner journey. And theology's purpose is to provide a coherent intellectual framework, protect faith from error. But theology alone, he argued, cannot grant direct knowledge of God.
That has to come from.
From the mystical path, from the heart's experience, his synthesis was all about making the internal the primary reality,
Oh.
emphasizing sincerity, ikhlas, intention, niyyah, the state of the heart. These are paramount. He believed, essentially, if you get the inside right, the outside will fall into place, which echoes that idea from The Power of Now.
So practice without inner devotion is empty.
An empty shell, exactly. And theological understanding without a transformed heart is just intellectual arrogance. By cultivating that awareness of oneness and a consciousness of love through mysticism, the believer could then infuse their legal practices with real spiritual meaning and their theological understanding with living truth, ensuring all aspects of faith serve the ultimate goal, that intimate union with God. The heart is the alchemist, transforming ritual into relationship, doctrine into devotion.
So bringing it to us today, for the learner, for anyone navigating this world just flooded with information, often superficial, what's Al-Ghazali's enduring message? What can we take from his grand synthesis in our own search for meaningful knowledge?
Well, his work offers this profound shortcut, in a way, to being genuinely well-informed, not just intellectually, but holistically mind, body, and spirit. By prioritizing inner knowledge, purification, integrating all parts of ourselves. His teachings speak directly to our modern problems of information overload, spiritual disconnect, fragmented understanding.
Because we can collect facts endlessly.
Right. But without that inner framework, without a purified heart to synthesize it, understand it, feel it, the facts remain disconnected. They don't nourish us. Like the untethered soul suggests, if you get the inside right, the outside will fall into place. It reminds us, true understanding isn't about piling up more data. It's about refining our inner capacity, cleaning the lens through which we see reality.
That reminds me of the Thoreau quote you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the humility like darkness reveals the heavenly lights. It suggests that by shedding our perceived knowledge, our intellectual pride, the ego's need to always be right or informed, we actually open ourselves to deeper truths, truths that are normally hidden by our own mental clutter.
So wisdom requires humility, letting go.
Al-Ghazali's journey screams that, yes, that willingness to empty ourselves, to allow the heart to become that alchemist that transmutes raw experience into refined spiritual insight.
It's really a call to look beyond the obvious surface stuff, to cultivate a different kind of vision, an inner eye that sees reality in a new, integrated, profound way. And it's not just for scholars, right? It's for everyone.
Exactly. You know, The Cloud of Unknowing, another great mystical text, talks about the powers of a soul, memory, reason, will, and how a work in purity of spirit allows us to become perceivers in the highest point of this contemplative act.
And that act isn't intellectual.
No, it's about direct spiritual perception, a knowing with the heart that goes beyond just thinking. Al-Ghazali's enduring legacy is precisely that, a comprehensive guide to cultivating this spiritual perception. He reveals that the true revival of religious sciences isn't just about books and doctrines. It's ultimately about a profound revival of the human heart itself, transforming the individual from within so they can then experience and embody truth, love, and virtue in every part of life, truly becoming an alchemist of their own heart. #outro.
And there you have it, our deep dive into the truly extraordinary life and transformative work of Al-Ghazali. What a journey.
Incredible, isn't it?
His path, from this highly esteemed academic to a humble mystic. It just reminds us that true knowledge, real fulfillment, often lies way beyond the conventional path, far beyond what the world usually calls success. He taught us that by embracing inner purification, devotion, by letting our hearts become these alchemists, we can synthesize the profound truths of our traditions, whether it's law, theology, mysticism, into a genuinely holistic, transformative way of living, a life that resonates with authenticity, with purpose.
And maybe as a final thought, something for you listening to ponder, consider this insight from the Theologia Germanica.
Okay.
It says, if the left eye be fulfilling its office toward outward things, that is, holding converse with time and the creatures, then must the right eye be hindered in its working, that is, in its contemplation. Therefore, whosoever will have the one must let the other go, for no man can serve two masters.
The left eye for outward things, the right eye for contemplation.
Two masters.
So we'll leave you with this question. How often in your own daily life do you find yourself unconsciously prioritizing that left eye? Constantly focused on outward affairs, time, responsibilities, all the demands of the world.
We all do it.
We do. So what might you gain? What profound insights might you unlock if you intentionally made space to allow your right eye, the eye of contemplation, to guide you sometimes towards a deeper sense of inner clarity and maybe profound peace.
Something to think about.
We certainly hope Al-Ghazali's journey inspires you to look inward, even just a little. Thanks so much for joining us on the Deep Dive.